G'day everyone. The G-Shock is probably the most popular and most cited watch offered by Casio you'll find on people's wrists. Yet on several occasions, I've spied this tough-looking and analog Casio out and about, and once I got an offer I couldn't refuse, or should have refused initially, which I'll talk about later. I had to get one for myself. So let's move along and review the Casio MRW200H-1A, which I'll just refer to now as the Casio. So here's a specs list of all the details, including case measurements, features, and price. Now, prices can vary significantly between models and retailers, so make sure you shop around. And if you like my content and haven't had a chance till now, a like and subscribe is always appreciated. Once you get this Casio out of the box, one of the first things you'll know is that this watch is not destined for the professional workplace, let alone dressy events. But its practical and rugged looks means you can wear it in almost any other setting, from casual outings, to gardening, to swimming at the beach, and even in polite company. So in that regard, this Casio is kind of an interesting blend of casual, field, beater, and dive watch. And after exploring this watch, I reckon it pulls off this look of many styles really well. The first feature that jumps at you are those printed yet prominent Arabic markers at every hour, save for the framed and surprising inclusion of a day and date complication at 3 o'clock. The hands are sword-shaped, and I will admit they do look a little out of proportion, with the hour hand being smaller yet chunky, and the minute hand needing just a tad more thickness. Yet despite their appearance, their differing dimensions help to distinguish them more easily, and the black backdrop on the dial really helps draw your attention to those hands and indices, making this one of the most legible analog watches I've ever worn. The smaller print is also a breeze to read up close. Underneath the main indices, you have the respective 24-hour markers, save for the 15, which is swallowed again by that day-date complication. And underneath the 12 or 24 indices, you have the Casio logo, along with the quartz text. And above the 6 or 18 position, you have the advertised 100-meter water resist rating. To add some needed dimension to that dial and prevent overcrowding, a raised chapter ring sits around the outer circumference of the dial to help with tracking minutes, with a bolder rectangle at every 5-minute interval. I'll talk more about the dial layout later, but for now, I'll certainly applaud Casio for doing such an excellent job with it. They've accentuated the information you need to know on that dial, such as the hands and indices, while still managing to keep the remaining content more compact yet still legible when needed. It's really ingenious. The case diameter is inching towards the larger end, but this is balanced out by the shorter lug-to-lug measurements, and the case thickness at a bit under 11.5mm gives it a more manageable look and feel. The lug width for the Casio is 18mm, yet with the absence of any obvious gaps on the top, the supplied strap matches these dimensions by flaring out at around 23.4mm at its thickest point, and tapering down to a little over 17mm at the bottom, which helps further with its wearability. And with the strap, the whole package only weighs 37 grams, so it's almost like wearing thin air. And with the exception of the case back and crown, the rest of the Casio's case is a resin construct. This material contributes to its lightweight and provides it with that sturdy, rugged feel. Granted, it isn't as strong as steel or other metals, but this means it'll easily cope with drops and other hard knocks without complaint. And with 100 meters of water resistance, the Casio will survive any water activities you subject it to that don't go deeper than snorkeling. If the black and white color scheme isn't your thing, the MRW200 series has a pretty extensive range of color and dial marking alternatives, so you'll be spoilt for choice there, although as mentioned before, prices will vary considerably. Now, normally I mention my mixed feelings at this point, but given how much this Casio offers at this price, I'm more inclined to say that the following features and quirks are not bad, but not great either. For a start, the Casio offers a bezel that actually rotates, and on some budget watches I've owned, this actually hasn't been an option, so this is a pleasant surprise. The markings are very legible and, like it or not, use a yellowish paint on the indices and a red triangle at the 12 position, but before you start getting any underwater ideas, bear in mind that the bezel has no lume whatsoever, not even a lume pip at 12. So instead you'll be using this bi-directional bezel to time things on the surface. And while it doesn't have that familiar click or ratchety sound to lock it into position with each turn, it still feels reasonably firm when turning it, and unless you bump it really hard, it'll remain where it's supposed to be. The movement, unsurprisingly, is quartz, and the main giveaway, save for the text, is that white ticking seconds hand. But at least it's a Miyota brand and they do have a reputation for reliability. And as I mentioned before, this movement includes a day-and-date complication. I love how Casio actually put a bit of care and effort into this feature by including a thick printed frame around it. Its only drawback is that its presence is dwarfed a little by those large indices, so you will need to glance and concentrate a little more to read it. And that comment takes me back to the dial layout. You see, I love its execution, but to be honest, there is a lot of detail to take in here. And with the absence of any remaining dial real estate, some people may think it's a bit too busy or cluttered. I think if Casio removed the quartz and water resist text, it would help space things out a little. Covering the dial is an acrylic crystal which will show scratches at the drop of a hat. At least compared to mineral, you have the option to buff out light damage with some polywatch. Although one thing Casio could have done is raise that bezel just a pinch higher above the crystal to help give it some much needed protection. The case back, as mentioned before, is steel and held down by 4 separate screws. Laser etched and running left to right and top to bottom are the Casio's details, including model number and other specifications. Again, all useful information, but not something that'll make you yell, wow! The crown is well protected thanks to the inclusion of crown guards that almost envelop it. Its push-pull operation is simple enough and doesn't feel overly tight or loose, which is reassuring. Although given the small size of the crown, you'll need smaller fingers or decent fingernails to get a decent grip on it. Adjusting the hands in the second crown position is straightforward, although setting it to the first position requires that balance of force and gentleness. And similar to the Addy's quartz diver I reviewed earlier, you need to spin the crown a fair bit to get the date and day to roll over, and there's no snap or click sounds at each turn, making the experience feel a bit flat. But being a quartz, you'll only be adjusting this once every 2 months or so. Which now leads me to the cons of the Casio. The big one is that strap. It looks and feels exactly like the one I got on my Casio AE1200 a couple of years ago, and if you watch my review on that, you'll remember that it has a tendency to chafe the wrist, especially in hot and humid weather, and the strap eventually broke despite limited wear and I had to source a replacement. The strap on this Casio feels just as flimsy, and I'm counting the days when it finally gives up too. And given the unique dimensions and lug position on this Casio, you will be limited on strap choices, although you can still do what I did with my old Royale and hit up AliExpress for a replacement at a low price, so you're not completely out of options. As a small positive, at least the buckle is signed. The lume is, well, present at least. On first glance you already know those indices aren't going to last long, but when you put it through its paces, they fade out completely after just several minutes. And at around the 13-minute mark, I stopped the test after the hands lost almost all legibility. In short, yes, there is lume, but very, very little of it. So if you recall the title of this video, I wondered if this Casio is the bargain of the year. When I purchased it off Amazon, it was already marked down to $45, and for that price I was stoked. But if I'd been patient for another couple of days, I could have got it at a further discounted price of $35. And to get a watch at that price that not only has decent specifications and build quality, but elicits as much interest and excitement on the wrist as it does, truly makes me feel this Casio should be at the top of the to-buy list for anyone that has even the slightest interest in casual, field, or beta watches. It isn't perfect, but its foibles can easily be forgiven and overlooked once you get it on wrist and admire its toolish yet amazing design and layout. And it's even sweeter when you realize that you paid less than $50 for it. Oh yeah! If you currently or have previously owned this Casio model, I'd like to hear your thoughts about it. But that's it for now, and thanks for watching, eh?